Testing, 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 testing. Perfect.
Why don't you just turn this off until we want to, well, which one do you want to use?
It doesn't matter. I'll use this one.
No. I'll use this one.
All right. I guess I can use the gavel. It's normal. I'm going to call the Marvin Planning Board meeting for October 18th, 2022 to order. We have a quorum. Has anyone had a chance has everyone had a chance to look at the agenda? Are there any questions or changes? Great. If there are no changes, we could get a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? All right, so moving on. And same for the previous minutes. Everyone had a chance to review those. Any changes? No. All right, I guess someone would like to make a motion to. All right. Second. Anyone? And all in favor? Thank you. Do we have anyone sign up for public comment? Public comment will also be required to do an interpretive dance tonight, just in case you sign up. That was a joke for the record. But don't put it in there. Does that require a text amendment?
Robbie Smith of 1336 Crane Road. I'd like to speak on the Marvin Mission Center. And Robbie, if you could stand next to that mic right there, it's on.
Right here?
Yep.
Okay. So my name is Robbie Smith. I'm court custodian at Marvin, Banks Presbyterian Church, just over here. We have the manse, which is the former town hall for the village of Marvin. So our plan has always been to utilize that, once you guys left, utilize that for church use. And we decided as a session to turn that into what we call the Marvin Mission Center. So when we spoke with Hunter a while back, he's like, well, it can be used for civic use, but then it's like, no, it needs to be residential. So per Hunter's suggestion, what we're planning to do is have that property resurveyed so that it's all one contiguous piece of property, which pretty much goes from, which would incorporate our fellowship hall, our church sanctuary, and what we call the manse. Its new name is the Marvin Mission Center, so that we could utilize it for any type of counseling services, food bank, any type of mission-related service. So we do have a prospective tenant right now, and they're here, and it's the Marvin Women's Center. So if you have any questions, we have the director here. She can answer any questions. But I just wanted to communicate to you guys what our plans and our intent are. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them now or later.
Yeah, we're not allowed to speak back at this time, so we can ask our questions.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
And no one else has signed up.
All right. All right, we're gonna tackle the first item on the discussion. We are now putting on our hats for the function of the Design Review Board to discuss and consider the Estates at Marvin Branch subdivision entrance monument sign application. Monument sign just seems so small compared to what this thing actually is. So we're going to our best friend over here who can't seem to leave us alone. We're glad to have you back. So Hunter, do you want to go ahead and if you could also direct us to which attachment we should be looking at?
If you would like to pull up the I guess second attachment, it's the pretty much staff memo, not like the cover page. It kind of goes over the specifics of your guys' role and what's being reviewed tonight. So we've received a sign permit application from Jones Homes for the subdivision sign, monument sign for the estates in Marvin Branch.
Is your mic on?
Yes.
Okay,
Speakers are not operational yet, but it is feeding on.
okay, perfect.
And per our ordinance, all subdivision monument signs do go through the DRB review process. So basically, that's why it's on the agenda tonight. Staff has completed kind of their preliminary review. Everything is compliant. There were, I guess, a few questions that I were able to get some clarification on from the applicant and kind of going over those. So per ordinance, the approval criteria for the signage, the subdivision entry monument sign does not interfere with visibility for motorists, pedestrians, or bicyclists. The subdivision entry monuments are in harmony with its surrounding and or consistent with the land use plan requirements. The subdivision entry monuments where located will not require the removal of significant number of healthy trees or shrubs. The subdivision entryway monument permit application provides evidence of sufficient and permanent means of their upkeep, maintenance, and regulation in accordance with the Marvin codes. The subdivision entry monuments comply with the minimum design and development standards outlined in the Code of Ordinances, inclusive of sign provisions and applicable design and development standards of the chapter. And finally, the subdivision monuments will comply with the minimum design and development standards of the Code of Ordinances. Well, I guess I put that twice in. With that being said, for monument signs per ordinance, the maximum area is 40 square feet. I know the applicant on the application had 120 square feet. The way our ordinance reads, and I think I did provide that attachment, it's actually the lettering and marketing of the actual development itself. So the applicant was able to give me this information, if I can find this email right here. Which I got this clarification after I sent out the packets, but basically, this is the only thing that I did not comply with. That the total area square footage of the lettering of the faceplate is 32.6 square feet. So it is under that maximum 40,000 or 40 square feet. The height is 8 feet, which exceeds the minimum, which the proposal is for 9 feet and 1 inch above the base. The depth varies, which the minimum for that is 2 feet. And then the whole sign base height, I'm not even sure how our ordinance still states. I mean, this is one thing that's being amended. For some reason, it says 2 to 4 inches, and it should be probably 2 to 4 feet, which would comply. The applicants would be 2 feet, so it would meet that generic standard. With that being said, are there any questions from the board? The sign proposal is included in your guys' packets.
The only question I have is, I understand the 40 square feet for the sign itself with the lettering. What are the ordinances around the structure that's attached to? Do we have any?
Columns and fences can be attached to the sign. They just comply with the height maximum, which I think for columns 8 or 6 feet. And same thing for the fencing. I mean, the fencing is outside of the right of way and a max height of, I think, 6 feet as well. I can't remember if I included those language in your packets, but yes, like the sign itself is really what you see in your guys' packets and the final attachment, where it just says like the estates at Marvin Branch. That's technically by what our ordinance defines as the sign itself. Everything else around it is then just part of this, not included in the sign dimensions, but is permitted per our ordinance.
Anyone have any other questions, thoughts? All right, well, Hunter, if it. No, you're fine. I keep forgetting which way the mic is. If you think that everything is, they tick all the boxes, I know I reviewed it. It's beautiful, and they took care of everything that I had questions about, so.
Is there anything, Ben, you want to add? The other thing I'll mention, and I did research on this, and this was part of their initial approval. The setback requirements, it's in our ordinance, it references monument signs at like 30 feet off the edge of right of way, which makes no sense because if you look at every single subdivision sign in Marvin, they're not 30 feet back. But that's kind of where I think that clause is, like, with it going through DRB process, as long as if it's outside the site the engineered site triangle and stuff, and when I say and stuff, and does not impede any type of traffic safety, then that's pretty much the minimum setback. But so other than that, yes, everything else with the submitted application does comply with that sign ordinance.
If there are no questions or comments, if someone would like to make a motion.
I'll move to approve the Estates of Marvin Branch subdivision entrance monument sign contingent upon the village engineer's review.
Well done.
Just making sure.
Masterclass. Can I have a second?
I'll go ahead and I'll second that.
All right, that's Rich. And all in favor?
Right.
So moved. Thank you. All right, switching back. All right. Discussion of zoning text amendment application 2022-2 Marvin Women's Center.
All right, so we have received a text amendment application to amend basically the chapter 151.0080, which is our Marvin residential zoning district regulations. This was submitted by Larry Sheen of the McIntosh Law Firm, which is acting on behalf of the Marvin's Women's Center. Just a little background here is that the nonprofit organization, as well as the members of Banks Presbyterian, met with me back in probably February, March, knowing with that village, we were moving from the old village hall to this one, that building would be vacant. There was some discussion because of how the current ordinance reads, that it reads at the current moment that churches, house of worship, and other places of worship, or synagogues and other places of worship, are a special use in the Marvin residential district. And then it states, and their customary related uses. There was discussion with the village attorney that because it's a standalone parcel, because the parsonage or the old village hall actually sits on its own parcel, that it's the only use of the property. So meaning the customary related use part, or nonprofit, would not apply unless they were potentially all on the same parcel. And as well as the whole nonprofit language kind of behind that. So the text amendment would be to allow nonprofit customary uses related with the church use as an accessory use, basically. Pending that they're all on the same property and that it's not, pending that, yeah, basically, and it's not the only use on the property, I guess I should say, is the nonprofit. So the text amendment application was received a few weeks ago, per our ordinance, that staff has done their preliminary, review of it. There are some recommended options, changes. One of those being, the civic district that I think we discussed back in April, May. This is just where our zoning ordinance is a little dated on this specific type of issue. With that being said, tonight's mainly for you guys to ask questions, maybe discuss the text amendment application as a whole, as well as allow for the applicant to speak any further. I don't really intend for you guys to take action tonight because, like I said, this was kind of being brought up for this meeting due to our November meeting having the training. And you guys have 60 days to make a recommendation to council from basically today until, there would be the December meeting. And my thought would be you guys can, ask questions to myself. If I don't have the answer, I can definitely get that back to you guys. Any other additional recommendations, this can be potentially recommended at the November meeting or then further discussed in depth with all the information you guys have requested at the December meeting.
I definitely have questions. It really has nothing to do with the nonprofit that's looking to lease the space. It's more about how the language is in our ordinance and the change. Because the way that it looks like the text amendment is being proposed is that it's just nonprofit uses by churches, synagogues, and places of worship. It's not actually approving nonprofits to function on that, in that area, right? So that, to me, is confusing for one thing, because it seems like it's attached just specifically to places and houses of worship.
So nonprofits as a use is very hard to make a use, because most nonprofits do numerous things. So most zoning ordinances regulate by use. If it is like a family help center, if it's a food pantry, certain things like that, like maybe are more regulated. The definition of what a nonprofit use or those uses, what plays kind of the important to answer your question. How this is being read, or how this is, I guess, the intent here, and this is some of these things that I'm working through with my staff that I've got to talk with the applicant. Just kind of all get on the same page, is that the nonprofit as a customary related use to the church, yes, like it mainly means that if the church is the principal use on the property, any type of accessory nonprofit would be kind of those customary related uses. Prime example of this would be the Weddington Church that has like the counseling center in it, because it's one parcel, one building, all of that. Like it's therefore then kind of customarily related to their the principal use of the property. So that's one way of how it can be read and kind of fixed, I guess. I was not made aware until tonight that Banks is, I guess, proceeding with combining the properties, which is kind of per the recommendation. It just uses are tied with the property itself. It's the highest and whatever the permitted use of the property, everything else after that. I mean, if there's multiple buildings, it can be either part of that permitted use or a customary related use.
So when he was speaking and mentioned that, it almost seemed like the text amendment isn't really needed if they're going to rezone it and combine it all into one, not rezone, but combine it all into one lot.
Yeah, I mean, there's still both can be needed. It really, if they wanted to keep the parcels the same, my recommendation would be to the current text, without really diving into looking at just some research, would be to have either nonprofit or some of those like public service, community service type
Social
organization.
services.
Yes, as a special use, which then it would allow for that use to be standalone on that property. But having the customary like nonprofit use as part of their, I guess that with our current zoning, it doesn't impact it per se.
It's currently zoned resident,
It is.
even though we functioned as a village out of that space.
So also in that same district
law.
does allow government facilities as a special use in the Marvin Residential District.
Okay.
And that's where that whole civic district discussion that was earlier this year came up. I actually did have a talk with the attorney today, and that's still something I think that either long-term or we bring back up and try to couple it with this text amendment per se, would make more sense. Because instead of us just keep either adding uses or creating, basically adding uses or other stuff to our Marvin Residential District, you got to think it applies to the whole district as a whole. And 95% of Marvin is on this district, which, not saying that it could open up, but you got to think of it impacting the district as a whole, especially when it's applying to your zoning ordinance and what district it's impacting.
Does it matter that the church is using a different entity to perform the counseling services, or do the services have to be performed by the church itself?
I don't have that answer. I mean, that's stuff from a legal standpoint that was kind of discussed and what led to this specific application. But if the property's owned and if it's all in the same parcel and it's once again, the use of the track is the church, then
It's a smoother, it's an easier.
yeah, it
Yeah.
would then all kind of fall under that umbrella.
Mhm.
When it's a standalone, that is where it gets a little. Because
It would be a lease. I mean,
Yeah.
they would be leasing it from the church. So even though it might be, you know,
Is there a difference between leasing space in the church versus leasing a building from the church?
yes, because with it being on two separate parcels, that's where the holdup is. Like, if they were on the same, or they were to rent the community room that I know we've had some meetings in, once again, it would kind of fall under the church umbrella. With it being two parcels, where this kind of really hit a snag.
it's almost kind of like treated like a separate business.
Yeah.
The other thing. Sorry, let me go back to, it's just a weird situation that I'm still trying to get my mind around, because churches are not-for-profits. And we're just saying nonprofit, we're not making a distinction between a 501c3 and then whatever the number is that churches are in, 501c4. I'm not sure what the tax categorization is, but you'd think that they wouldn't need that distinction if it were.
Like I said, it's when
In
it gets
our
down to the use, and that's what makes you don't. If you look at any other zoning ordinance, church is a use, or house of worship, and then all the definitions of what house of worship is a use, even though they all can fall under that nonprofit or 501 designation. It's the use itself, because really anybody can start a nonprofit for whatever they want, and so then that's one of staff's already like preliminary stuff. And I've mentioned this to the applicant that there's a few things and I'm getting them comments, and typically per our process, you guys wouldn't really be discussing this till November. I just haven't had time with everything else that either been submitted or been working on to get this to where we're like formally discussing and having all those answers tonight. But all this is stuff that I can definitely have brought back to you by like I said, the next meeting or December.
So how is Weddington structured right now? Their counseling center and their extra building?
I don't have
Is it still zoned residential and? but
still
the-
zone residential,
but the counseling is done by the church, the Weddington church.
from my understanding, yes.
Okay, I'm just
But
trying to
it
see
could
if there's
be-
a way to relate, like,
Yeah, and
See,
that's
if-
all that stuff that I looked into. It's just like what it comes down to when you're looking at land use is the use itself and the property itself. And you do it by highest and best use. So like if you have a residential property, that's why like home occupations are like then an accessory. Like your best, the business isn't the highest and best use or the most permitted use on the property. It's the residential use. And then we have regulations for either that accessory, if it's a structure, or the home occupation and so on. Because, how am I trying to say this? So one, yes, because it's on residential. Two, because that district allows churches and house of worship as a use granted with a special use permit grant being approved. That's the use itself is what you have to focus on. So we have to now, with this text amendment, there's other things that I'm gonna have to probably do is either look at a better recommendation on specifically defining either that use or the uses that we want to potentially consider as a nonprofit related use to a church, counseling, mission center, whatever. As I gathered, the text amendment is being driven by the potential tenant, but the church seems like they want to have this as an option, for any type of mission or something moving forward. So it's trying to make sure we try to make sure that we do this the best way possible and not create any type of loophole, Pandora's box opening in different areas, but two, just making it clearer, because to your point, how it's being proposed, I understand what it's trying to achieve. It's just that wouldn't be formally how, there's gonna have to be some other just additional stuff to it to make it consistent with our ordinance and clear. So we don't create any.
When I read the proposed change and then the reason for the change, I was confused because they only added the word nonprofit in the text, but then they said they're trying to do this so that nonprofits associated with religious institutions can operate on the site. So I don't think their insertion of nonprofit is clear enough if they're trying to accomplish the reasons for the change. I think they need to say nonprofit associated with the religious institution.
And yeah, and that's just formal. I mean, that's a good recommendation to definitely clarify on. I mean, like you're putting that in there, because I completely agree. Because that's what the attorney and I discussed earlier today, is like, him and I understand the intent, and like, we get that. It's just, there are some things that have to be just flushed out to make it where we're just not approving like a text that then's gonna make it maybe inconsistent somewhere else or not make sense in the long term. I mean, because we know what it is, but the goal would be, so future planning board staff, whoever it is, isn't asking the same questions right now. Because that happens a lot with our current ordinance, for sure.
And while this is, while what's being proposed, the nonprofit that is being, proposed to come in and take over that space is perfectly fine. If Banks Church were to move and it were to go into another, I mean, we just never know like what could potentially go in there. So, so this, I know there was something in our ordinance that talked about not halfway houses, but like, family care home for up to 6 clients. This is not, I'm asking a question of Hunter, I'm asking a question of members of the audience.
Yeah, that's fine.
The proposed nonprofit, it's not, you're not providing housing for women, it's just counseling and supportive services.
So it's just normal business hours that should be, okay.
And let's be honest, that house is not small enough to do a lot of business. So, I mean, it's too small, so it's not gonna be like a rush, thank you.
So for my clarification, Hunter, the real concerning with the wordage here is ultimately to ensure that whatever we do does not set the village of Marvin up for other residential properties to become houses to nonprofits in a way that would be inconsistent with the residential zoning. That's the ultimate concern with this. We don't.
Correct.
It could, for the sake of argument, it could be Bob's Counseling, it could be whatever else these lovely people would put inside their building. We just want to ensure that this doesn't then become, y'all don't want me turning my house into, without a special use permit or other things.
Correct, because I mean, you think a lot of subdivisions, they have covenants that this is probably gonna protect, but yes, what it would be is because most of the property that's in Marvin is zoned in this district, especially the older house, existing house and stuff that were not in any existing subdivision. Yeah, in theory, if they wanted to sell their house and a church bought it and wanted to quote unquote have service out of it, as long as they got a special use permit, like that'd be granted. And that's where that civic district definitely would clarify a lot of this. Cause like we could still allow house of worship and stuff as a special use, but it would make more sense to have a district kind of for some of these uses. Which, like I said, this could be coupled with that to an extent. And then a set of them going through, I mean, the fee, for example, is the same for the text amendment and rezoning. We could adopt the district and then they would just rezone. The timeline would be the same.
So is the plan then before the next meeting for you to do some pondering and come back to us with the best way to help?
Yeah, because
facilitate the proper use of this?
Going off this application, like I said, we would want to definitely clarify on, we would want to define nonprofit or define those uses that we're in our definitions of what is a customary related worship or related use to a church. Then we do a little wordsmith and the text amendment can still go that way. Or I sent the civic stuff that was very preliminary to Chaplain today. I hope to probably speak more on it with him tomorrow or Thursday. If it's something, because like I said, our November meeting already has a training that we get back in December that we feel pretty confident in. Because you guys have briefly seen it before. You guys like the idea. I know council had no issue with the idea. Then we would basically take what their text amendment is, put it in the civic district where it doesn't impact the residential district fully, and create a district and then just rezone. And we would rezone those properties already identified, which would include this.
Yeah, I would feel more comfortable if there was a definition or a list of customary related uses. Because just because we have one religion in front of us doing something that, we're familiar with does not mean, I know that there's like a house of prayer, or there is some, it's on Google, it's very bizarre, behind my house on someone's private property. And, they could come out and say, well, we are a place of worship and we can do this, with that property. I mean, like,
But I appreciate that. Also don't really feel like that's our place to define how other people worship. And so I don't,
no, sorry.
of customary uses, I don't really feel like that's our business.
So, according to well, this is kind of going to, not every religion values life. Not every religion sees acts of violence as illegal or against the law. Do you know what I mean?
I do, but I also don't think that's our job.
By defining what is a customary related use?
Mhm.
Really?
Not when it comes to, I don't.
Okay.
Even if I don't morally agree with it, I still just don't feel like that's my business. I think that's a slippery slope, but I do feel good about a civic area, and I do feel good about that. But I just,
Yeah,
it's not
I'm
comfortable.
looking at an extreme situation,
I
but
am
So it's
But I
an
just-
extreme. I mean, I catch a ram in the thickets and I want to bring it out, put it on the table and slaughter it right there. I mean, we're not going to get that deep. You're sitting here saying a food bank, council.
no, I understand what we're saying here. I'm saying, but legally,
But those things, but valuing human life, we've already legally established as a nation. I don't think we need to establish it under a list of things that we're not gonna.
no,
I just
I'm
think we
not
just
saying
need to-
I'm not saying we need to put that in there. It's kind of like the acceptable uses that we did for the Heritage District, right? Like, these are the things that you can't do. These are customary related uses.
Well, let's see what you come
Yeah.
up with.
Yeah, and to build off of that, like, for example, customary home occupation. Like, we kind of have an outline in our ordinance now of like what is technically defined as a customary home occupation. Like, it's would be kind of something similar to that. I've got probably about 10 different ordinances that I've looked at / been just doing research, because we're not, this has definitely came up before somewhere else. And I'm just trying to, I want to find some definitions on what I think best applies to what they're trying to achieve. And then, like I said, that's then defining that use. And either this applicant or future, like if they meet those parameters and we're okay with it, if we think it meets that definition, then it gets into like, okay, then it is permitted, or it's permitted with a special use permit or whatever. Another thing that I'm really want to do in our ordinance, and I think I mentioned this, I can't remember if it was in the civic, is that we can require additional requirements or special requirements for certain uses that don't have to be granted a special use permit, because sometimes those obviously those go to council. And so if we create some special requirements that those uses meet, then it's also administratively approved. Like, those are certain things. That's what a lot of other great ordinances do. They're pretty kind of standard. We did that for the Heritage District for like microbreweries and all that stuff. And we defined all of that because we could put them as special use, but then necessarily didn't really have any criteria and what the council or planning board would be reviewing for those. So all that stuff that would be included with this text amendment, slash, like I said, can go one of two ways. I do agree that I think the Civic is for the long term. This is basically an opportunity for us to bring that back up and kill two birds with one stone with this.
No
And-
killing, no killing.
Tackle two things with one hit. But I do, because like I said, from their timeline and per our ordinance, it would also meet the process and achieve their goal of their application, as well as clarify and achieve a lot of things better for our ordinance and moving forward. So do we want to ask if the applicant has anything else to add? Because I know we jumped into that. Is there anything else you guys would like to add or speak on?
One thing I'm going to add is we also know approximately 4 other acres on the right facing the Marvin Mission Center. So,
The wooded area.
we have no plans to develop that, but, at some point, that's a possibility as well. Our goal is to make that one contiguous piece of property. That way we don't have to come here and ask for special zoning or special use. We want to be able to, we are a Christian-based church. We want to create a mission center which brings value to the kingdom of Jesus Christ. And whether that's Marvin Women's Center one day, or maybe it's a counseling center like Methodist Church offers. This community needs it, and we want to be able to provide it and do it in a good, respectable way that brings value to this wonderful village of Marvin, which I'm proud to be a part of. Any questions for me?
Were there other uses that you could think of? I mean, because we're sitting here just kind of struggling when you talked about food bank to have, or for counseling. Are there other things that
Well,
we
we
could add to the list? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. We've talked about the food bank. We've talked about missionaries. Like we do work with jars. Missionaries coming back from maybe Papua New Guinea, they need a place to spend 6 weeks to reacclimate. We support Ground 40. It's a organization where it provides rehab to people who are addicted to drugs and substance abuse. Maybe that could be a landing pad for them. It could be an area where we just have Bible studies for our church. Right now, the fellowship hall serves that purpose. But we want it to be a center that will always be there, that can provide Christian value for this community. To be honest with you, we even thought about tearing it down because it's it needs a new roof, needs a lot of work, and I was even one of the proponents of that. Let's tear it down and not have the expense. But then the session, they're like, you know what? It can add value to this community. We can spend some money. We have the money. We can spend some money to fix it up, put a new roof, take some of the old trees and stuff that are just overgrown, clean it up, and make it a good-looking building that can provide value to this community. And the session ultimately agreed 100%. That's what we want to do. So we want it to be a value to this wonderful community that we live in.
And I have another technical question. Are you planning on potentially leasing it to a nonprofit, or would you be donating the space to the nonprofit?
We want the option to do both.
Okay. Because I don't know if that would, I know it's about the use.
Yeah, for us, it's about the use. We were leasing that building to the town of Village of Marvin for a much lower value than we should have. But we wanted to be a good steward and a good partner to you guys. And we were, and you were a good partner to us. We want to continue that same relationship with mission centers. And if that means we lease it to them at a reduced rate, we want to be able to do it. If we want to just say, come in here, and, maybe help us with the expenses, make a donation every now and then. We want that right as well.
I just wasn't sure if that would change the way the language would be, Hunter.
If they were leasing or donating.
Yeah, I mean, if it was just an extension of the church.
Well, and that's kind of what the intent would be if they combine the parcels.
That's right. Yeah,
Because-
that's our intent right now, is to combine the parcels.
And even if they don't, that's where this text amendment, even if it's house worship and their customer, we kind of define that a little further. Like there's other ways where if they decide to leave it as a separate parcel, it would have to still go through the special use permit or, depending on how the civic language reads, but the best way, yes, would be to combine it because then that just becomes kind of an accessory or customary related use and it's all one parcel and it all falls under the umbrella of banks. And, but overall then leasing or donating would not impact how we define, how we regulate or any of that. Because it's the same concept. I mean, if Boy Scouts used it, I mean, all of that, like different community organizations or even like when the village used it for, I mean, it just all kind of falls under that same umbrella. And I was,
Shouldn't be, we're making it too restrictive for the church to operate how they want.
yeah, and that's, I was looking at our ordinance and like our definitions right now for church and house of worship, it's defined as a building or structure, a group of buildings or structures which by design and construction are primarily intended for conducting organized religious services whose site may include an accessory area for the endowment of the dead. But we then also have like a definition of a community center, which kind of falls under that, but then we don't have community center as any type of, it's certain things like that where our ordinance either defines it and then it's not ever permitted, which, I mean, that's typical to an extent. Or just, they're all not incorporated. The other thing that I was thinking about kind of going through this is probably updating that definition or some of those, like I said, there's much better ordinances that have been updated that I've got, that I've been looking at that probably clarify a lot better on, what like we're discussing right now. I just got to get all that put together for us to look at, and either at the November meeting, I will possibly give you guys recommendations and kind of the next steps, and still not, because of the training, not take action, but at least we'll have that material. And then in December, we can make the recommendation either on the civic or the text amendment as it stands with some minor changes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
All right, preliminary review of the estates of Marvin Acres, Brantley Farm property. Subdivision sketch plans submittal.
Okay, so this is another one that we kind of moved up so I can get you guys this information, let you guys ask questions, go through the development. But per our ordinance, really, there's going to be no formal recommendation being made tonight. But, kind of getting into it. So the village has received a sketch plan application for a residential subdivision at the people know it as the Brantley property. It's two parcels. It's roughly about 48 acres on the corner of Joe Carr and Marvin. The proposals for 21 single-family residential lots, and this proposal, like I said, was received in full in the last couple of weeks. Wanted to get this in front of you guys to ask questions and have a chance to provide some feedback recommendations to the applicant. It's similar to what we did for the heritage, for the conditional zoning. We have a preliminary, but I just wanted to go ahead and get this size in front of you so we can kind of keep the process moving forward and not have to either special any additional meetings or so on. I did provide a just very, very preliminary staff report in the packets. As I mentioned, it's for 21 homes on 48 acres. That yields roughly about a 0.48 units per acre from a density standpoint. The property is surrounded to the north. You have the residential wetlands, and then Mecklenburg County. It's the Audrey Chase subdivision across the border. To the south is it's residential / vacant. It's where Elysian Fields is at. That still has not been developed. East is the estates at Marvin Branch that was recently approved and just approved their subdivision sign. And then to the west is additional residential, as well as it does adjoin, I guess, technically the country club, golf, and so on. The proposed lot characteristics for the development, as well as, does comply with our ordinance, 50 foot front setback, 20 foot on the side, 40 on the rear, and it's 75 on the rear yard if it abuts another residential lot, which I think there might only be a few of those, but we can kind of get into that here in a few minutes. The minimum lot width's 130 feet, and the minimum road frontage is 50 feet. There's only, I think, 2 lots. Let me actually just get this pulled back up. Sorry. In front of me. That would have that kind of 50-foot road frontage. Is it 3 parcels that are 5 acres? I believe.
Backside.
But so those would still kind of be, comply with how, with our ordinance having that minimum road frontage. Drainage, once again, this is kind of my standard typical analysis of staff report. Some of this information I'm still getting from the applicant and will be fully provided to you guys when you guys are fully making your recommendation and consideration. Water and sewer, the developments proposed would utilize Union County water and sewer. The sewer basically tie into, they would have to get an easement from the estates of Marvin Branch and tie into that main line. Which once again, all that flows to 6 Mile, which one does not include a pump. Their development does not include a pump station, and 2, 6 Mile is not at a capacity issue. So it should not be any problem as long as they get the proper easements and get their approvals from Union County on meet the minimum requirements of what the sewer system is for the development. The view shed, per our ordinance, the view shed, there's a formula in there that talks about acreage and calculation, and then the maximum is 285 feet. The proposal has a variation of the view shed, which, we'll discuss, we can discuss a little bit tonight, but we'll definitely discuss further. Basically, their proposal is to ask for a view shed reduction by the council, similar to Elysian Fields and the estates, due to the hill splitter buffer, the creek buffers that are 200 feet per the state. So that does kind of put some type of impact on one buildable area, but as well as just like the usable area with this development already being at a very kind of low density. That's something to consider. It's not like they're trying to do this to squeeze out more lots. It's just because of that hardship with that buffer. The applicant actually has already consulted with DOT on this about some of their, some of their initial kind of their sketch plan for their road improvements. Those comments are in your packets. Basically, their original approval did have 2 accesses. DOT is only going to allow 1. They are proposing the road in the development to be private and gated, which then ties into our next agenda item that we'll get into. But at this time, if the ordinance to allow gates in private roads does pass, then they have that avenue, and I'll kind of get into that into the next item discussion. But that's part of the reason why that text amendment is not just benefiting one development that's requested. It's kind of tying into a couple of things. Public involvement meeting. So technically the first step after they submit their application is to host a public involvement meeting. Due to everything that we have going on here at the village, really the earliest to get them scheduled is November 1st. So they will hold their public involvement meeting November 1st. We'll have 2 sessions, one from 3 to 5, one from 5 to 7 here at Village Hall. Once they do that, then it can actually begin kind of the formal recommendation process. That coupled with just some of the other the information needed to meet our submittal requirements. With all that being said, unless there's any questions for me, I'm going to turn it over to the applicants and maybe let them go through their submittal. Like I said, this is your opportunity to ask questions for me or the developers, and as well as provide any additional recommendations, feedback. if I don't have the answer to those questions, and all this is stuff that I'll make sure will be outlined in the formal staff report as we move forward in the recommendation process. You guys want to introduce yourself? And if you want to come up to the mic, if you want to sit or you can just stand, we're working on our AV. But
My name is Brandon Maxwell. I'm with Exponential Development. I have my civil engineer here, Kyle Crow, a couple other members here, Mike Shalati, Mike Sandy. They're with our team as well. We're more or less just wondering if there's any questions, kind of preliminary, to see if we can get ahead of the game and knock those out before our official meeting. So
This road we have here is already dangerous, Marvin Road. Have you been here around 5 o'clock in the evening?
yes,
You see the traffic? How can we say that this is not going to impact traffic negatively when the traffic already is impacted negatively?
yeah, I think that was the biggest concern with asking for the entrance off of Marvin Road. So that's why we engaged a traffic impact analysis team. And so they ran their kind of preliminary numbers, and
They're running numbers, but numbers don't really define what actually happens out there, I don't think, because it's not a very safe road. There's constantly accidents on that road. It was a farm to market road that we never improved on, and we're not going farm to market anymore.
I think and that, I was surprised to actually see the entrance, an ingress egress where this is. I mean, it's better than further up, but the poor farmer who lived there before used to have to, his fence was constantly getting knocked down because cars were running off the road because it's in a curve. And he finally ended up moving the fence. I think it saved him some pennies, but I mean, people fly around that curve. I would worry about coming in and out of this. I'm surprised you couldn't get something off of Joe Kerr. I don't know if Joe Carr, sorry.
yeah, a lot had to do with the
It's
existing
KE.
home. That's off of Joe Carr. The existing home is kind of smack dab in the middle, and then of course we have the creek and the buffers on the right of that as well. So it's kind of a lot of issues to try and get an access point there, other than that the small access that he has, which is right on the corner right now of Joe Carr and Marvin Road. But I think the entrance on Marvin Road, I don't know if Kyle has specifics on how far that is from the corner, but to me, I feel it's sufficient. It's so far away from that corner at the edge of the property. So I would hope that it would give people sufficient time in and out without any issues.
to kind of add on to that, two things here is that with Marvin Road being an NCDOT road, they would be the one that would grant the driveway access for the development. We can provide some recommendations and we can consult with DOT, but it's at the end of the day, they're going to say where the driveway should and shouldn't go. The other part talking about traffic is long-term, since Marvin's in the roundabout business, that intersection was identified on the county's critical intersection grant would be potentially a roundabout. I don't know the timeline, and I'm not going to try to guess, but long-term there would be some type of traffic improvements, either roundabout. I know that we've also mentioned the DOT due to the concerns of safety and accidents of looking at that intersection for any type of spot safety funding, which would be some like temporary improvements. Once again, it's kind of like DOT either gives us funds and then tells us what we can and can't do with them or at certain things. But that's information I'll try to consult further with DOT and provide to you during that during our formal discussion on this item. With that being said, I know you're talking about numbers and traffic and how the development, not truly knowing what's going on there. And that's kind of one reason we asked for a traffic impact analysis study. So it gives us an idea. DOT also requires it because depending on the size of the development, there could be some initial traffic improvements done by the developer for them to get their driveway access permit. So I'll try to have, more of that information for you guys at the next meeting.
See, Mike, I looked at it a little bit differently than you. Because I think it said that there would be 24 PM, what is it, 14 ingresses and, I don't know, 9 out. That's not adding a lot. And I think there was a comment in there where it said that didn't warrant the left turn lane, which I think definitely there needs to be a left turn lane if you were to make the in and out along that road. But look at the people that drive down that road. How many of them are going down to South Carolina? I mean, I don't want to sit here and start throwing that out there. I mean, when I first moved there 18 years ago, and Mike, you probably remember driving on Newtown Road, you could make an exit onto Newtown Road going 35 miles an hour. Now you got people going 60, 70 miles an hour on there. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Yes, we have a speeding problem. There's no question about it. But something like this, if you were to make the entrance on Marvin, it's got to be a left turn lane. And
Well, it's not just this. I mean, it's 21 homes here. We just approved, the previous one on Joe Carr. We got Elijah Fields that's approved if he ever builds that.
right.
So it's a lot more,
Well, I don't
and
disagree.
I'm not punishing them for coming to us, but at some point, we got to address traffic. We can't just keep approving stuff and saying, well, it's DOT's problem. I mean, I don't know.
No, definitely not DOT's problem. It's
It's our problem. It's
It
the
is,
one,
well,
we're the ones
because
that
we
are
own that
driving up
road
and down
from
these
that.
roads every single day. Our kids are driving up and down these roads every single
it
day.
is dangerous.
And we're
I
seeing
don't
people
disagree.
crash into the Firethorn fence, and we're seeing people crash into the other fence.
Oh, remember when one of those people ran up the
Yeah, I mean,
electricity pole?
sure.
Oh, heavens.
And
Betsy.
saying that this is safe and it's adequate, it just doesn't fly. To me.
We had preliminary conversations with NCDOT as well about that, the future roundabout, and we're absolutely willing to grant the easement for that and, work with them however we can. They had mentioned in the TIA, no need for the left turn lane, but not to say that, if that's something to protect everybody's safety, then, we'll absolutely do that if it's.
One recommendation, I mean, I just thought of this and like I said, it's going to be ultimately DOT said, but if we can potentially get some funds for some safety improvements, because to your point, there's not a turn lane to turn on the Joe Car, and sometimes that backs up. It's coupling. I mean, one right away would have to be procured, but luckily you might have some available. That doing a turn lane into their development, but even trying to have some of that right away to do a turn lane up at Joe Car. That's just an idea. I haven't thought further about it.
I
Just
think
wanted to
traffic
mention.
circle's a great idea, but, we see how quickly they move.
Yeah.
And that
So,
would really be eating into, I mean, either Firethorn would have to give up some of the golf course or like this poor property owner on the other side. I mean, that's a lot of land in order to try and, I mean, I guess you could do a smaller little
Well, you're
one
looking
where-
at safety right at first. We're not looking at, somebody can't golf. And we're not looking at, somebody giving up land. We're looking at how safe these roads are. I'm not really
I-
concerned about that.
So
I'm
that is still
totally
a
with you.
Union County road. That's not our road.
Marvin,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
it's
not
maintained by,
Marvin.
by DOT.
One of the things I would say first is widen the lanes. When your people are going towards Mecklenburg County, when they come around that turn, how many times have you been coming up, you're going south, and people are going north towards Mecklenburg, and they're inside of your lane because.
And vice versa.
Because they're going
Mhm.
50, 60
In the
miles an hour.
summertime,
So safety is definitely an issue.
There's no lights on that road.
There's no lights on that road.
Summertime, it's
That's all of
completely
Union
covered
County.
with trees. It's pitch black.
That's a really
Without
dangerous
any-
section.
Right, new moon, it's impossible to drive
You
there.
can't see anything on there.
Have you guys, the Melinda,
This is gonna baffle some of you, but I think like they're coming to us, it's effectively by right,
Yep.
right? I mean, and we just went through, and I think everybody knows my stance that I was on. No offense, Ben, on the previous establishments and other properties that have been put in, but in all fairness, like these gentlemen have come to us with what we have said we want to hold as the baseline for Marvin, right? Which is 1 house per acre, and in some of these, they're larger, and some of them are larger because no one really builds on a swamp, so we'll give you a little extra swamp space, but now you got 5 acres in Marvin, so congratulations, right? Here's my question, though. Tell me where, I was looking through this, and I don't see where you want the variance for the view shed buffer.
that back corner?
Because I hadn't gotten that far yet, but I'll be real honest with you, like that ends up kind of buttering my toast, because like maybe give dude in the back less than 5 acres. You can have 4.5. You guys can give us that other half acre up front. So that even if we have 118, is it in the back?
I think it's in that back corner, right?
Okay, maybe I missed it. Okay.
It's like bright green on, is that
Oh,
the
is that what that
only,
green is?
is that the only spot that's the bright green?
Oh, well then,
There's a
okay.
200-foot DEQ buffer for the fuel shed.
Right.
Yep.
Fuel splitter in the back.
Goes across there, right?
That's area that we
Right
dedicate.
Oh.
Right by the blue
So
light.
then you don't need a variance. You're not asking for, I thought someone said something about at one point it needed to be less than, and they were gonna ask for,
So the
If it-
total area we provided, code requires it along the frontage.
Yeah.
So we'd be taking some from the frontage and providing it.
We want to provide pre-preservations. We do not want to have some of the problems that some other communities in the area, because of this requirement, ended up sacrificing trees and protection that would have been much more valuable than that.
So sorry, so it'll be- still not as much in the front, but more in the back.
So per our ordinance, the view shed for any type of subdivision, proposal, there's a calculation based off the amount of acreage and so on. The maximum is 285.
Mhm.
If their calculation's over 285, it's still 285. What they're proposing that our ordinance does allow, it's a, reduction in that view shed minimum, not to go, the minimum of it's 85, but it's, so
Right.
their ask is not to go below 85, it's to go below what they're required is per our ordinance with that formula.
Got it. Okay, that's where I
Um,
was getting confused. I thought
this
you were
is,
talking below 85.
Yeah, this has been granted for Elysian Fields and the estates for about the same hardship that.
Which we said did not set precedent over and over again.
Correct, you're right, because the way our ordinance reads it, it's a variance that's granted by council because of a hardship, but yet it's not an actual variance that follows a true variance procedure.
I mean, I'm not blaming them for doing the by right, and they're doing the right thing. And this is exactly what we want. We want 21 homes on
Sure.
43 acres.
Yep.
We don't want it on one of our main roads
So we just
where we
approved
have
one on Newtown.
145. I know.
True.
I mean, like,
Are
we've got
we
one
doing?
in the
Yeah, they're
curve.
coming and taking advantage of the by right, and we're allowing it because we have to, and we're just
We just-
complicating the road system.
Yep, but we just approved one in the curve of Newtown Road. At least it's
Which is
straight
more-
here, and I
which is more
appreciate,
dangerous.
because this is, my guess is, and I don't mean this aggressive, my guess is this hits closer to home for some of us, and the other one hit closer to home for others.
Sure. It has
Because
to.
you're not driving,
driving.
literally Kelly and I
Yeah.
pull out
And
of our
that's why it's
driveways into
important.
this new
That's why
one.
it's important we have a broad spectrum of people on
Absolutely.
on this board, because so it does hit home for
For all
somebody
of
who
us,
can
hopefully.
speak
Yeah,
up.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Staying on Mr. Lavelle.
Mhm.
uh, We have been in Union County since 1984. I have lived in Marvin for more than 20 years. My children were born in Marvin, went to schools in Marvin. We left because of job requirements, and we're coming back. You're talking about people who are investing themselves into this. We're not doing this. for-
Not questioning it at all.
And I fully sympathize and I understand, and I'm one of the people who gets aggravated with the traffic because I have to take it. A lot of the people using that area and traffic congestion is from basically coming from out of town. It's not locally generated. It's just basically that coming from Mecklenburg County or going to South Carolina. So it's not local. And frankly, most of the people who probably work there will be making a right lane, will be making a right turn and going to a Charlotte for employment. A lot of us are retired. We want to make that home again. We are coming here to you. We know what we're entitled to by right, but this is our home, and we're not just trying to get by with anything. We're wanting to make this a home again that we all would be proud of, and in accordance with the vision and the goals of our town. So we're fully invested in this. This is not only for commercial purposes, but I fully understand, but I don't think the 21 is going to be basically creating the problem or actually resolving the problem that we all are suffering and will continue to suffer until DOT come up with a resolution. We will be fully compliant with the DOT requirements. We will have our traffic engineers work with them very closely. We have already jumped on that, and we will continue to do that. So it's not like, we're going to be developing it, selling it, and leaving it for others to worry about. We will be suffering from it as well. But
Would a traffic circle be something that you guys would consider? If you go to the DOT and say, listen, we think a
We'll
travel circle
work
would
with
be
the
great there.
professionals. Like I said,
Yeah.
this is gonna be our home, so when our kids get killed trying to live there, we're not gonna try to cut corners. I fully sympathize with what you're saying, and I've been putting up with this for
Right.
more than 20 years. It didn't used to be like this. Now we have sheriff deputies trying to get people around. So I said, I don't think though it is our proposed development that's really gonna kill the impact or generate a much more negative impact on the problem that we all are suffering from. We all need to work together on resolving.
Seems like we're all contributing to the problem rather than solving the problem.
Exactly, but again, we will retain the best engineers to help us come up with the resolutions. And this is DOT requirement, and we will be working very close with them. So rest assured, we don't cut corners. We're here because we want to be a good neighbor. This is a home for us, and we'll do all we can to work very, very closely with you. I do sympathize with what you're saying.
So you're saying you're gonna investigate and try to figure out some traffic solutions for Marvin Road and Joe Carr?
Well,
I'm
I can't
curious.
resolve your entire problem, but I could certainly work on making sure that our development does not contribute a lot more, if any, and help with whatever way we can. I can't make, I can't resolve the problem for you, but I could minimize it as it relates to us, because the problem is much bigger than our development. And I think y'all probably relate to what I'm talking about.
That's the discussion that we've talked, DOT, we're willing to donate the right of way for a roundabout, if that's what DOT would like, we'd like to donate to that, that would be our contribution toward alleviating the problem that already exists. So we're willing to do that, and spoke to Hunter about it, and that's.
We're engaged, we're not trying to dump it. I mean, we will be living there ourselves, so we will be dealing with this problem when we leave and when we come back, and what our children are leaving and coming back. So I fully sympathize and respect what you're saying, but rest assured, we'll do whatever we can. But we will not be the one who really magnify the problem with the reasonable number of lots that we're proposing.
I have a question for you about, is the layout, the way these homes are laid out, is this, have you guys done other types of layouts where you could potentially try an ingress egress off of Joe Carr? I don't know how far their road would have to be from the existing home that they surround, but I mean, they're definitely, if they had to be off Marvin Road, that's a better place than further towards Joe Carr, but it would be more ideal to have them enter and exit off of Joe Carr. So
two things is, yeah, I mean, I completely understand that the entrance off of Joe Carr makes sense. One, per DOT's comments, they would want it to line up with Pacer Lane.
sorry, they would what?
Would want it to line up with Pacer Lane, which what that brings in is in that buffer that can't be disturbed. So that stuff, I haven't discussed with the applicant any further, I mean, about that potentially. I mean, this is all stuff that, like I said, would be going on during this time before it actually formally gets to you guys. But it's also kind of the way their lot is. If you look at how the buffer impacts, like I said, this is, I don't know, to an extent, I don't know. And I don't know if they ran numbers or ran different type of site plans, but how then that buffer would impact their lot.
You talked about the NCDEQ buffer.
Yeah.
Lining up with Pacer, right?
We did. We tried a couple of different variations, and it just boiled down to three things, which was the existing house that's on the corner in the far back. That's not being demoed. That's going to be renovated. That's going to be saved. It's going to stay there. And then the home that exists already on Joe Carr, and then the stream buffer. And with those three, issues, I guess they're not issues, but with those three things, that's what led us for the entrance off of Marvin Road.
Hunter, the orange and the green on, it's just so hard to. I'm on page 3. The orange and the green, sorry, it's either too small or you have to make it too big. So do those, I see where the wetlands are. And then the 100, is that like a 100-foot?
So that's the 100-year floodplain line.
100-year floodplain. You're not allowed to build anything, like they couldn't even do a road.
Well, the biggest thing is the green, which is that buffer, because the buffer, per our ordinance, the stream buffer is 100 feet off the creek bed, and that's when you get into like that upland zone, land use zone, all that stuff.
I was on the page.
The 200-foot buffer is a requirement by the state that basically, yeah, like no disturbance in it. And trust me, I spoke with the state on this. Basically, if they wanted to disturb in it, then it's like, it was like a 3 or 5 time. It was a 3 to 5, like a 3 or 1 or 5 to 1 ratio, and what they had to pay to mitigate. I mean, that's trying to line it up and so on. I mean, yeah, looking at it on paper, it could potentially be done, but, and trust me, like I'm in the same boat, you know, from a staff level. I think it makes sense off of Joe Carr, but there's other factors that were brought to the attention and other things that had to kind of change the way their site plan is being proposed. But yeah, I mean, I know you had experience with the estates and their thing. Do you have anything to kind of add on?
No, I think what you guys are talking about, you don't want to drive up, and that, the Hillsborough Buffer is very good to try to clear your small amount for road access. So, you know, that's one of the, Hillsborough Buffer goes to commercial and something like that, you're trying to get access.
So even on the, so if I'm on page 4 and I'm looking, I'm over in the corner where, this blue thing is.
The detention pond?
Water feature or something. So you couldn't even widen the road there to do a turn lane, like dig in, like come into that property to widen the road there, because of the 100-year floodplain. It all attaches to Marvin Road.
Well, that's where their view shed's greater. So in theory, if they wanted to just do 85 across the board, there could be potentially room there for right of way to widen and do a turn lane. And I was looking at the email from DOT. It does say, you know, if the access is from Marvin Road, it would have to be at least located 1,000 feet from Joe Carr. And according to the comment from DOT, it says would have to require construction of a left turn lane for them to get their driveway permit. Even though their TIA didn't say that, like I said, DOT has their own set of standards. They're the ones that approve the driveway permit. If the applicants don't want to get their driveway access there, that's what the stipulations are going to be. But, you know, looking at it, the right of way to procure that would probably come off of their property, and it would be in that already area that's a greater part of the view shed / I don't even think there's much trees because of the way the fence line goes right there, that you wouldn't even be losing trees.
Because my thought is like, if there's a way to utilize the property to potentially widen there, or even, you know, like what are some of the traffic calming strategies that we could implement as they develop to slow people down on that section of the road, just regardless. So like whether it's a welcome to Marvin sign, you know, and they donate the, you know, the 40 square feet so that we could put a sign up, you know, like what with lights, you know, like what could we do?
Well,
This is an opportunity to
yeah, I mean,
find ways to get people to slow down and be safer.
so there's things that we can kind of do, and there's other things that we can propose to DOT and have to gain their approval. For example, if we want to do anything with speed limit, any of that, DOT is the one that enforces that. It came up on Waxhaw Marvin where we thought that we requested the speed limit, and they have this engineered book that says, nope, the traffic counts and the road length or road width and so on meets the definition of 45 mile per hour zone. I'm completely in the same boat as you guys. Like, I think it should be 35, whatever, but that's DOT. So depending on what type of traffic calming, if it's any type of signage, reduction in that, DOT's gonna have to sign off on that. If it's like a welcome to Marvin sign that's potentially outside of the DOT right away, then yes, I mean, that's something that we can do. Granted, we would have to have either they would have to grant us, you know, either permission / donate the piece of land to do something like that on their side of the property, as well as if it would be looking at on the other side, then that's getting into another private owner private property owner, either, like I said, donating or granting easement for some type of signage like that. Because
But
it's gonna have
I'm
to be out.
sure would be happy to get people to slow down so they could get out of their driveway.
Yeah, and
I've
potentially
seen them,
look,
I've seen them take their lives in their own hands trying to get into their driveway before it's.
This could stimulate what we've been trying to do for a long time, and that is drop the speed limit down to 35 on Marvin. And the new homes that are being built that are on the opposite side of Joe Carr, right across from Fire Corner, there's gonna be 5 homes there. You've got these homes with an access. I can't even imagine it's gonna stay 45. It's something that we could really, talk to them about. This is gonna necessitate it.
Have we brought this up with our state rep, we have?
Yeah.
Are they planning to do anything, or they just?
Yeah, well, it's like I said, it's now evolved. It's changed. We tried to get it down to 35 last year. And, they just said with their studies that no, 45 is all good, but now see, everything's changing now. So,
I mean, do we have updated traffic studies? What traffic studies are you using as far as?
we actually do have an updated,
The one I see in here is 2016.
those are probably from traffic counts from that. I can get,
2016, Marvin's changed a ton since 2016.
we just had,
None on Joe Carr that I found.
we actually just requested, I'll have to go double check emails. We requested DOT to do a traffic analysis of Marvin Road. I can't remember if we have their report or if they're still working on that, but that is something I can get updated traffic counts either from DOTs. They do them every 2 years or every year or two, depending on the road. I can see if those numbers are passed. If not, we can even, I can work with Union County to get traffic counters out there. So some of that data can be provided to the applicant as well as to the board. But with all that being said, yes, we can, I will look back through my emails and see if DOT got back to us on the traffic analysis study for Marvin Road. And if not, I'll follow up and try to have that, and share with the applicant as well as you guys. Cause I know that is something the council requested, Christina to reach out to them about. I just can't remember them what happened with it. Cause that's been with about 3 months, I think, within the last 3 months. But, the other thing is that, what I'll do is work with the applicant as well as discuss with DOT on potentially other traffic solutions that DOT will grant / other calming potentials, as like I said, and look into some spot safety. Because I think that was really the intent of doing that traffic analysis from DOT, is to look at the crash analysis data and other factors with, the amount of cars and the speed limit and all that stuff, to look at if there's a chance that we might be able to get some funding from DOT to do some minor improvements there.
What about putting shoulders in? I mean, the main difference in Marvin Road and Union versus Mecklenburg is you can go off the road by this much and you're off the shoulder and lost control of your cars. Anyone talked about is that something they can even do?
We put stones a while back along
Yeah,
those,
we
didn't you?
talked about the last meeting, we talked about bike lanes.
Yeah.
And, that was,
They'd need to be 3 or 4 bikes deep
yeah.
in order to accommodate them.
But we're talking about them pushing for a shoulder.
Single lane, what is
I
that?
agree with what you're saying, but you'd have to widen the road first. Because if you put a shoulder on there, that's gonna make it too tight. A lot of cars aren't gonna be able to navigate.
I mean, expand the road to the shoulder. Yeah, not.
Yeah. No, but I agree with you.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be curbs on there.
What is I'm just curious, I was looking there, well, what is the price point? I know this is hard to figure out now, but what would be the price point of the homes, you think?
So, yeah, it's a tough one to answer right now. And, so I try not to, box ourselves in when it comes to that. But, in turn, we try and mimic what's adjacent to the property and just kind of stay with the flow price point and that point, square footage and even aesthetics. So we'll try and match up to neighboring properties.
Comparable.
Exactly.
What are the comps you're seeing then?
I'm sorry?
What are the comps that you're seeing?
So again, we haven't really dug in that far, but really any adjacent property owners really is what we'll look at. I would say within quarter mile, something like that, half mile.
The thing is, there's costs associated with that, and even like if some are smaller, that would not be a market equivalent to this. It will be higher than that. It would be something that would be attractive.
So do you have sizes in mind?
Size.
Size.
Some of, like the house that would be preserved is like 3,800 square feet. So it would be 3,000 plus. This is what probably you need in this area. I've lived in 4,800 square feet, and that's a hotel. You know what I'm saying? Seriously. And again, you don't need 2,500 square feet because again, the cost of the land and all of the stuff. So it will be north of that, but probably not 4,800 square feet. That's a little bit overkill.
On
I
one
live
acre,
in Weddington
all these-
Chase, if you're familiar with it. So a lot of nice homes, but it's an overkill. One suggestion, I have a lot of experience in dealing with DOT problems. By the way, I'm retired government, both of us are retired government employees. We have served the public sector for 30 years. The best thing, Mr. Arcolis, if I pronounce it correctly, I would recommend to you, from my experience, that we also hold a group and meet with the DOT board member. Your legislator is not going to do anything. That's a board of transportation member. He's the one that could force DOT to do something. That's my recommendation to you. Anytime I made any improvements in Union County, whatever favorable, fruitful improvements I've made in Union County, it's through DOT board members. That's what I would recommend to you. That's what you need to do.
Bob, do you have meetings with our
You see
board
what I'm
members?
saying? The legislators, they're limited. They might talk big, but they're limited. DOT doesn't listen to them. But a board member will make things happen.
Are you familiar with that, Bob?
I'm trying to remember the person's name.
They changed. It used to be Larry Helms. I don't think he's on board anymore. He was appointed by Mike Easley, but I'm sure it has changed. So, but that really, this is the way for you.
Good recommendation.
Appreciate it. This is the way. to get some changes.
Yep.
Hunter, the radar that is right after Innsbruck,
Mhm.
does that record how many cars are going above the speed?
Yes.
So is that something we could use then to show? I mean, because Bob, you were talking about how their cars are speeding down that. I didn't know that's not, it's kind of straight there, but still.
I can't remember. Our deputies provide that data each month to council in their agenda packets. So two things. One, looking at it and breaking it down. I mean, everybody can interpret data how they want, but it was like only a small percentage. And I mean, like small percentage, we're going over, I think 50, 55, and I don't have it right in front of me. But that small handful is still, what causes some of the problems. And so our deputies use that data because I think it's time stamped to an extent on when, peak hours, especially when a lot of this is occurring, and use it as policing or, just on where they should be doing their, either speed checks or out monitoring to catch people speeding and get those tickets out. But I do not know if we have thought about or did use any of that data and share with DOT. But it's definitely something I can look into.
I mean, if nothing else, you can get, because it's really hard not to make that thing go off because unless you're going under the speed limit, if you do 46 or 47, it
It's
starts
going
flashing
up,
at
right,
you saying you're
right.
speeding. And it's like,
Yeah.
just,
Right, a mile or two over. is
I don't
not the
have
end
my
of the
cruise
world.
control on yet,
Well, I had a problem with that, and I voiced my opinion about it in one meeting, was that high graph would show between 45 and 55, the little yellow sliver, and then above 55, it's like even more of a sliver, and I see, look, everybody's paying themselves. I said, but you're basing that on 45 miles an hour. I said, who's deciding it should be 45 miles an hour? How about we go 35 miles an hour, now base?
Just sort of run it for a period so we can get a different kind of a benchmark and.
But it didn't talk about volume.
Mr. Lavelle, you raised the question about traffic counts. DOT for a long period of time during COVID, they stopped because they felt that it was not an actual reflection of the
Probably
traffic. Because, what we were going
Sure.
through in the pandemic. So, but they are
Traffic's
probably
wonderful.
give up, but trust me, the best way to get resolution to a lot of our problems in Marvin, to get something done, is DOT board member. And I'm sure you could get to, whether through a legislator or a senator, or even, Marvin is important to the state. Marvin is very important to the state. We probably don't need anybody. We could go request a meeting and meet with them.
Our traffic circles will tell you different.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, certainly. We could take videos and take pictures with drones or whatever and show what we're dealing with. And it is a dangerous situation, especially at that intersection. And it has been for a long time, and it needs to be resolved. But again, that's how we get it resolved, with the people that could make the decision. Union County can't do it, the sheriff cannot do it. I submit to you, legislators can't do it, but DOT board members can.
Well, they failed us so far, so.
Yeah, well, somebody is certainly listening to DOT, because from Union County line into Mecklenburg, that stretch up to Captain Archery, wherever that road is, how many times would they repave that and restripe it? That's probably one of the best maintained pieces of roads. I've ever
And they got
driven.
lights.
Don't forget our
According
mayor lived there for a while.
Well,
Charlotte's mayor did.
Charlotte's mayor.
They got arrested.
But ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for your time.
I have one,
Yes,
I'm sorry, I have one
absolutely,
last question.
absolutely.
Is this a detention or retention pond? The blue area, the blue,
Yeah, it's proposed to probably be like a sand filter or something along those lines.
is there a way to put that somewhere where you won't have to cut the trees down?
I mean, that's really the low part of the site.
Okay, so it's
That's
about,
where the property drains.
Yeah, that was, yeah, unfortunately, I never like to put them up at the front, but that's just how this one kind of fell.
So what are you gonna put a-
There would still be an
potentially
80
fountain in there? I mean,
Yeah, of course. Oh, yeah, you could make it a water feature, absolutely. You could
Yeah.
beautify it for sure, for
That's
sure,
where I was
for
thinking.
sure.
Yeah, but there wouldn't be any clearing between that and the roads.
okay,
Just like you have on 12 Mile Creek Road, those developments, you see all of these water fountains, all of these are best management practices, water filtration, stormwater features. So, but you could make them pretty and make them a water feature for people to enjoy. Could put few benches around where people could sit and read a book.
Exactly, yes.
Feed the dogs, whatever.
you know, I will say, and I don't know if this is even possible, but, this is one of the last active farms we have, and from a personal standpoint, my family is in love, or was in love with the animals. We know them by name. We're very upset that Cricket is no longer in the pasture there. And if you could just let the new owners know that if he needs a new home, we will be happy to adopt him, even though we don't own any outdoor pets. We have the acres, but so, I mean, and like I said, I know that this is like your initial design, but if there's any way to flip the 5 acres to the front, just to preserve any of the openness and the space, you can do, by right, you can do what you need to do. I'm just saying, this is one of the
Sure.
last true beautiful places in Marvin that hasn't been touched yet. So if there's any way to preserve any of that, I would just encourage you to
We fell
take
in love with it.
advantage.
That's why we're doing it. And we will
Yeah.
work very closely with Humber on what we could reasonably do. Because we value the things that you're concerned about and you like to preserve.
And for the record, the niece owns the horse and the donkey there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Cricket is his name.
Um,
He's very cute.
Cricket's the donkey, right?
What's that?
Cricket's the donkey.
Cricket's the donkey.
Yeah, so she's selling the donkey, but keeping the horse, so.
Oh, she's selling him?
Yeah.
Okay, well, if you're still here late when we're done, I'd love to get that number. My husband would totally buy him, I'm telling you. We might be applying to clear some more acreage to make room for Cricket.
We really appreciate your input and your feedback. This is why we wanted to hold this. We wanted to have an exchange and see what you like and what you don't like, and for you to hear from us what we're trying to do. But if I leave you with anything, we're making homes for ourselves. We're not doing this for mainly commercial purposes. And we have a lot. First of all, we are Union County, and more importantly, Marvin people.
It's very funny to hear your southern accent come in. Like it sneaks in every once in a while. You have a little southern accent that just it's just certain words just kind of affected with.
I left Lebanon when I was 16, and I've been in Charlotte Before
meant
Charlotte,
Southern Lebanon.
when there was only
Southern
one building
Lebanese,
on
yeah.
Independence Road, those of you that grew up here, there was only one mirror building on Independence Boulevard or, 74 that you could see all the way from Monroe or all the way from Sharon Amity. So,
I moved here in
yeah,
69.
but I'm glad to be affiliated with a lot of the good things that happened here. Both of us have worked very hard, and this is near and dear to our heart. And we have seen it change, and hopefully we have made some kind of good contribution to it. A lot of the schools that your kids are involved in, those were financed by me. Those happened during my time, and unfortunately, they haven't done anything since then. So we're proud of what we have done, and we want to preserve it. We're invested in it.
Well, we appreciate you guys preemptively coming to have the conversation, and thank you for listening to our comments and feedback, and
We'll see you again.
we'll see
Thank
you
you so
again.
much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank
But
you.
hopefully not as much as this guy right here, because he's like always
Hannah did
here,
a great job.
always here.
So, yeah, so just now to kind of look, looking ahead, they'll hold their PIM in the 1st of November, and per ordinance, it can go to PRG if there's some type of Parks Rec and Greenway aspect. I'm probably just have it on PRG actually agenda that same day. It'll be back on your agenda for the November meeting. Probably really won't get into anything. It's mainly included in your packets because PIM minutes and everything are a requirement. Depending on timing, we're waiting to see how long training is going to take on all this stuff. We might go into further discussion, but mainly we're going to discuss this more in depth, have full analysis staff report at the December meeting. Go ahead and mention now anything that's in the November packet that you guys have questions on. Definitely we can discuss that briefly for the meeting so I can make sure you guys have all that information for the future meeting. But yeah, so this will be on the next 2 or 3 agendas for sure.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
For having us here.
You too.
All right, moving on to discussion of gated subdivisions and private roads.
Okay.
This is the easy topic.
Oh, I hope so.
Well,
This has been a loaded evening.
well,
Welcome to your first meeting.
We're generally home by now.
and we're actually we are moving along a whole lot quicker than I maybe expected. On top of, I hope we have this figured out. And if you guys bless it to then after we discuss it, we're not going to be as long as I thought we were when we sent packets out last week, because this encompasses a lot, but the light bulb came on yesterday. So just to kind of recap, Winmore on top of, this proposed development, is wanting to install gates. Per our ordinance right now, we don't allow don't allow private roads. And we also do not allow, access control devices such as gates to impede any type of public right of way. Can't do that. With all that being said, our ordinance does have the rural subdivision that allows one private road and allows gates, all this stuff. And thinking about it, I was looking at some other ordinances and I forgot we completely had this when I was going through just some of my old notes from my previous job, and it's like, wait a second, the town of Valdez has gated subdivisions as a special use. Basically, it's like a classification of a major subdivision. So in front of you guys, I gave a printout. It looks, like this. It's just kind of this option. Now, this is just the base of what the regulations to allow gates and gated subdivisions. The biggest thing is that so it would be a special use permit that would open it up for existing development and new, contingent upon this approval. The regulations that are in here, though, are basically like existing subdivisions. We're gonna, put a cap. The recommended cap's like 15 homes, so it doesn't in one ingress egress where you don't have to open Pandora's box of larger developments or whoever trying to take their roads back over and gate them. The other thing that this would, one of the stats would be that if you do have, use Innisbrook, I think Innisbrook is like 30 lot or 30 homes, but there are one ingress egress. Technically, the preserve is 2. But, if you had a development where NCDOT or the Village of Marvin already maintains their roads, they would have to go through the or the right-of-way abandonment process outlined in the state statutes from 68-299. With that being said, that then gives council kind of that, one, it requires all property owners that requesting to close that public right-of-way has to sign off on it, which was one requirement council already kind of wanted if we were considering something like this.
Can you repeat that? All homeowners in the HOA would have to sign off.
All property owners that abut that that public right-of-way. So
But the private right away.
the public right-of-way. So pretty much all homeowners in the neighborhood would have to, unless you're like, for some reason, let's say you had the two property owners at the like you had a cul-de-sac development. And the
Right.
very back to, I mean, technically that portion could sort of remain public, but they would have to be deeded private access. But yes, all property owners that the right of way that is to be abandoned, is to impact has to sign off. Because basically like they would then, the right of way would be relinquished from a public standpoint and then given either to the HOA, the specific property owner, because you know, how we mentioned sometimes some deeds read that the property owner is responsible for their portion of the road in their neighborhood up to the center line and so on. So yes, it would require all the property owners at the right of way to be abandoned. The cool thing about that is that one, if they're already been accepted by the village or NCDOT, we have a whole lot more authority to say no. I mean, on top of DOT has their own, I mean, we would kind of mirror their, I mean, they follow the same procedure, but we would probably meet, all their requirements and so on. So that really then prohibits existing developments that especially the village receives POW bill funds, already maintains their roads from having any type of, avenue to hurt in the long run. The other thing that this requires is a maintenance agreement where it strictly identifies, hey, the HOA or the property owners or so on will be responsible for maintaining the road and everything. I know our newest board member, he's off of a road that's not in a subdivision or is, but it's a private road / public road that's not being maintained. But this would actually provide them an avenue with the whole right-of-way abandonment thing, provide them an avenue to actually get control of that. So it's definitely kind of providing a lot of different opportunities. And what I mean by opportunities to better, I guess, certain developments or certain roads that maybe aren't in our system or DOTs and really clear up some legal trouble there. Let me think. The other thing. So the proposed, what's in front of you guys? So one, it would basically would add a definition of a gated subdivision. We would make a gated subdivision a special use in the Marvin Residential District. The special provisions are as outlined here. There's a few more that will probably be added. I did talk to Chaplin, the attorney today. He really liked how this was being proposed. Definitely approved the methodology and kind of like direction. Basically tonight, I want you guys to provide me some input, direction / if you guys like this idea and some of the parameters put in place, then I will move forward with actually drafting the formal text. Because the overall text amendment is going to encompass a lot of different things, like to make our ordinance consistent, because there's gonna have to be a lot of sections amended. And I didn't include this with your guys' packets because I didn't want to confuse you. But for example, like in the subdivision section where it says no private roads, we'd have to amend that language that says no private roads unless it's in a, approved, gated development or previous, stuff like that. So there's a lot of sections that would have to be amended for consistency if we proceed with how this is being proposed. Trying to think if there's anything else.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
So number 8, the road upon which the rural entryway gates will be installed is not a through road. And then it goes on to say only 8 dwelling units can be served by the gate.
So you want to?
So you're saying that, I'm just confused as to,
It wouldn't.
because we went from like the subdivision, talking about a subdivision that wanted to abandon public roadways and privatize their roads. And then now we're talking about the road upon which the rural entryway gates will be installed is not a through road.
So.
Is this just dealing with rural subdivisions?
No, this is where this whole clarification and thing I was just talking about, where it dives in even further. When the rural subdivision language was approved back in 2017, it was done and they didn't update these other sections of our ordinance. So that's why we have all these contradictions, as in the subdivision ordinance, we don't allow private roads. Like it specifically states that in the design standards for any type of subdivision that applies to minor, major, and in theory, rural. Well, if you read the rural subdivision specific language, it says you can have one public or private road. And it can be gated. It's like I said, it was done, and this language that's right here was pulled from what is the existing rural entry gate language that's in our sign ordinance. I think I included it in your packets. It's in the section that's titled signs in commercial and mixed use and conditional commercial districts. Makes no sense why it's there, but that's where it's at. Basically, when this text amendment was done, they looked at Wesley Chapel's and tried to cater it to Marvin / cater it to a specific development. If anybody wants to guess on that development, it was right across from Old Village Hall. With that being said, so it wasn't done as best as it could have. So it's it would be allowing gated subdivisions. And I wouldn't be getting rid of the rural subdivision. I would be also then amending all of that language to then be consistent. So what you're seeing with the 8 dwelling units, and for that, it's because that's what the rural language stated.
So what about, so I'm just, this is just now it's personal because I'm like, if we're talking now about putting a gate up,
Yeah.
On Meadowlark. So it's like, well, we are a rural subdivision, but not now by the current standards. So like, and we have a private road. So like with this language, we wouldn't be able to put a gate up.
So
So I'm
that's
just-
where basically the intent, and I forgot to update in the memo. I updated in the email that I sent to Chaplain because it does kind of clarify on some of that. Would be basically that stipulation is for any type of existing development that would be going through that right of way abandonment process. Your roads are already private. Technically, per our ordinance, you can gate it kind of how it is now because basically we allow gates. All our ordinance really states that you cannot do any type of access control device or anything to prohibit traffic on public right of ways. And yours is a private right of way, so you would be able to, in theory, already by our ordinance, put up a gate. But that is a good point of where, for consistency purposes, that's where that lot number, like the intent of the lot number is where it keeps it on some of these smaller subdivisions that are one ingress egress, and not, like I said, open up Pandora's box. But I do need to think about kind of getting some wordsmithing / just with clarity on how, like, for example, if your subdivision.
There's a couple subdivisions like ours that are larger than 8 dwelling units.
Yeah.
We are rural. Some probably don't even have a paved road. So I mean, it's just a matter of like,
And that's where, like I said, that dwelling unit, the kind of full intent there is to tie it to existing subdivisions that are already not, their roads are not private and they're kind of in this weird state. For example, Winmore. But I also have to be careful because I got to think like creating these as a gated subdivision and these special requirements. And Chaplain and I kind of talked briefly about this today. He didn't really see an issue. It's just, like I said, it's wordsmithing and making sure it's clear is that, setting a standard for existing in those numbers, if the roads are public, if it's a newly proposed subdivision, they can propose this private road and gate. Do we set a number for that? There's, like I said, a few other things that have to be flushed out, but this is kind of the direction and the intent. And so that shouldn't say 8. What was kind of what I sent to Chaplain was either 15 or 20. But you bring up a good point on how do I need to make sure that if this is direction that you guys are okay with, that we make it consistent across the board with how it reads, especially with existing subdivisions that are private or private roads.
Yeah, because it's, the way this kind of reads right now is that it doesn't, I didn't get this. I mean, this sounds like it's just about if you're going to privatize and you want a gate, this is what applies. So but
Yeah.
if you already are private and you want a gate, do you go somewhere? Do you go to this? Do you go somewhere else? So that's just, I would just want to know, like, if you're already a former rural, a large rural subdivision, what applies to your neighborhood?
Right, so we're gonna have to break this down, so we have the definition, but then you're gonna have to say this would be the provisions for subdivision, this would be the provisions if it were an existing private road.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying. It's either that when I say generalize, you make sure that it encompasses it all within those and or yes, breaking it out. That's the two options that I discussed with Chafflin today. And like I said, my light bulb went off at like 3:00 yesterday. Like I was working on the draft and it was getting really complicated. I'm like, wait a second. And luckily I was able to get it to him. We were going to chat about it this morning and I was like, this makes it a whole lot, when I say easier, just clarifying a lot and then not making it more complicated than it has to be and still protecting the best interests of Marvin as a whole. But yeah, those are two things that I can try to either go with that option where you do break out, like, and I don't know, for example, if it's gated subdivisions like this provision, or gated subdivisions are, how am I trying to word this? Basically, it would state that this use is only, and regulations are only for provisions of existing development that are currently not on platted private roads. And I would state then, like, if you are an existing development that your roads are already private, it would reference another section where it already allows gates.
That would be helpful.
So basically these provisions would only apply to existing subdivisions that those roads are not private.
As well as my current situation, that it's not technically a subdivision.
Yeah. And that's where why I said it, this issue or this kind of text amendment really got really complicated really quick is because the other thing that, we would have to update our right-of-way abandonment policy, which I've already got about 10, 15 good examples of that. There was a lot of processes and stuff that I wanted to make sure we had flushed out before we go through or have a text amendment that doesn't, some of those policies aren't, planning board's jurisdiction, but they do kind of impact how this text amendment moves forward. And luckily, kind of setting it up this way, it's not like we're, like I said, opening up where you're going to have all these developments it really limits who and why, and that's not to be discriminatory. It's just mainly to protect either village assets and our roads already, as well as it does become a whole lot more complicated the larger the subdivision. Because you can't, there's no way, like, for example, Firethorn can get every single one of their homeowners to be like, yeah, we'll take over our roads and we'll pay to have them resurface and so on, and some, X amount of years and maintain the gate. So
That would take a miracle.
so this is, yeah, I think this is kind of the best way that we can do it without really making it more complicated than it has to be.
Okay. So is this, I guess we're not in a place to make a.
No, mainly, and I guess one thing I forgot to mention is, so based off the last planning board meeting, you asked me to present this to council, see if they're even willing to consider it. They wanted to, once again, make sure protections were in place. I do have this on their agenda for next week, kind of the same kind of discussion that we're having now. Some of it will be more fleshed out based off of what was discussed tonight. But the biggest thing is I wanted to make sure that the planning board, that we're all on the same page and kind of like the direction that we're headed, or that I'm proposing with this text amendment. If so, then I will have a formal, fully fleshed out text amendment for November. Once again, if you guys review your packets and don't have any questions, you feel free to make a recommendation. If not, we can then discuss further at December for sure.
Does a private road only yield itself to a subdivision? I mean, I guess I'm where I'm going. Can we make Waxhaw, Marvin Road, a private road, and then put decals on residents' cars and everybody else would have to pay a toll to pass?
And then that's how we build the new school, it's gonna be over, not overcrowded.
As
I know that sounds like a wise guy question, but
well, and that's DOT would never allow that to happen in short, but
yeah, that would never fly. But for counties or for municipalities, villages that abut a state line, I think it would be a wonderful thing.
oh, for sure.
We should be able to get a hold of Newtown just because NCDOT is just not able to maintain it the way it needs to be maintained.
Can I ask a question about this?
If they don't mind.
Does anyone have any objections?
No objection.
Just information, if we're talking about you, you can, make it right away, like in this situation, it's kind of public road, kind of private road. If you get into the maintenance issue, you have, I thought I read that, you said something about, in a position like that, you wouldn't have an HOA maintained, but they didn't have an HOA, so they would maintain. Is there a habit or is that?
Yeah, I mean, that's how it's typically, that's how it is in deeds. And so the way that the ordinance reads is like, it says the maintenance of the subdivision, basically would provide either a recorded maintenance agreement with the homeowners association or basically all property owners that it would impact. I mean, because, yeah. And that would be, I mean, and that would be a stipulation really for the village probably to abandon the right of way. I mean, to have that process, to have that right of way abandoned. In most instances, like I said, you're going to have an HOA. In these other ones, like I mean, this is a conversation I had with Glenmore even before we got as far as we did. I was like, look, whatever you do is like, I'm going to need some type of legal documentation that you guys are going to maintain the road. It's not the village's responsibility. And all that stuff, because yeah, like we're not, because especially like we've had maintenance agreements in the past as part of our, typical subdivision process. And so if you have a maintenance agreement that says the village is going to maintain the roads, all the process abandoned, well, it's like, I don't want to open up a legal issue, kind of like what Meadowlark has, where it's like, all right, who's really responsible, who owns it, all this stuff, because you have one documentation that says this and one that doesn't. And so, yeah, everything where if it's not in the subdivision, everything, like we would make sure there's some type of legal document that then gets tied with the deeds as well.
And we own a property on a private road that has no HOA, and they're trying to establish a maintenance agreement, and because everyone's just been chipping in gravel. So, yeah,
What happens
good luck.
if you go through the abandonment, HOA wants to take over, gate becomes a private road? What happens to the utility lines that are underneath that private road?
It would be the same process as if, so right now in any type for our road acceptance policy from a public standpoint is that they have to get utility encroachments with us. They would either be transferred over to the entity that is responsible for maintaining those roads, or then said agreements would be null and void with the village, and that HOA / those utility companies would just have to get updated encroachment agreements with that. The easements will always be there because they're platted easements that aren't, but if they are within the right of way and whoever's responsible of that party, then they'll just have to get those updated encroachment agreements with that responsible party.
Okay, I never thought about that.
Yeah, like right now, and that's why like we, when we go through the road acceptance process, we require, as built and all those encroachment agreements and all that stuff, and they're all with the village, and then everything's accepted in. Like the applicant has to get them from utility companies where we don't have to do all the legwork, but it's, the agreements with us, they're reviewed by our engineer, and then that becomes part of their acceptance petition. And that's really why, like, if it's a road that's already accepted into the village, like, we don't want, like I said, we don't want to lose that from funding, but two, like, it just, there's no other, how am I trying to say this? like, we don't want to lose it from funding, but it's also like all that work's been put in and stuff where it's like, we know what's there, where it's at and all that stuff that this does then potentially provide an opportunity for if it's a road that's not in a neighborhood or a neighborhood that's older where some of this isn't, well, we can still get that updated information, and have it on record. So,
And the funding you're referring to is the Powell bill,
yeah, yes, sir.
or,
I forgot, you weren't here at the last meeting, were you?
no, it was not.
So, yeah, because that was the biggest thing is like, how do we do this and not have streets that are already accepted into the village try to go through this process and we potentially lose that PAL bill funding because it's associated with the mileage and everything. But there are roads in Marvin that are maintained by NCDOT that we do have agreements with them if they're in existing developments. We have like a plan with them. It's like 5 to 10 years. I mean, where long term we're taking over those roads from DOT once they're brought up to standard because we don't want to take over a road that's a liability. But there's other roads in Marvin that are either in a development where the developers just decided to go, hey, well, I mean, just disappear and not do anything, or in other cases, either older. I mean, areas like off of Waxaw Martin where these roads that are dedicated as public or even dedicated as private, but then it's not clear. I mean, there's a few roads on our Powell map that says public. It's in some in Providence, Glen that says like publicly dedicated but not maintained. We don't really know who's responsible for maintaining it. It's on our Powell map, but we're assuming I guess the HOA does because it's not DOT. Yeah.
Anyone have any other comments or questions before we move on? All right, thanks, Hunter.
So I'll move forward with this and get some clarification and kind of have a formal text for you guys for the November meeting. And I'll also update council on this next week.
Great. Thank you. Good work.
All right, moving on. Consider adoption of the 2023 planning board meeting schedule.
So this will be the briefest item of the day. This is scheduled for next year. It follows the same convention as every year, third Tuesday of the month. The only deviation is a joint meeting with council on the first Tuesday of the month at 6 p.m. That's just your annual joint meeting.
Are we going to look at changing the date of our December meeting of this year? And then I'm not sure I didn't see what it was for next year. It's just awfully close to.
Can we do that? It would be, can I ask that?
You can do it now. This is on meeting schedules. This is Jermaine.
So this year it's December 20th is Tuesday.
Yeah, so.
I know people had said that they'd be out of town because it's really close to Christmas, so.
Yeah, so last meeting, if you recall, we decided to schedule this training because I was like, hey, yeah, I don't have any applications. I'm, maybe expecting some, but then I got 3 and, yeah, it's bad.
Thanks, Hunter.
Then the November, because per our ordinance, typically when we receive those applications, I have like a 30, 45-day review period to get back comments, feedbacks, and all this stuff. And then it goes to you guys and everything. Well, I did not want to keep pushing this out where then, hey, we got November training, December we were talking about, because it is the week of Christmas. It's the 20th, I think, as of right now. How are we going to fit all this in? And that's part of the reason why the second and third item on the agenda tonight was what it was. I wanted to have more information. I like to try being as prepared as possible. It's just that I wanted the opportunity to get this in front of you guys. So it's like, we can get some preliminary questions, feedback and everything, so we can continue moving forward in the process. With all of that being said, we're going to need to have a December meeting. I discussed this with Austin. I discussed it with Kelly last week, is looking at potentially moving that date from Tuesday the 20th to Thursday the 16th, just where then it's not the week of Christmas. And if you guys don't have any issue with that, we can update the meeting schedule and have that meeting on a Thursday instead of a Tuesday.
Thursday would be the 15th.
Thursday.
Is it the 15th?
I'm good.
I'm good too.
So for the 2023 schedule, I need a motion to adopt that if you have no changes. And I'll make a separate motion for this other change.
I would move to adopt the 2023 schedule as I'll second it. Can I do that?
Yes, you
I don't ever get to,
You can do it.
I second. I got you, Melinda.
All in favor?
All in favor? Mike, I'm gonna pass the gavel to you. You're gonna wrap this meeting up.
Trying to
You're
get
gonna
us
wrap
outta
it
here.
up.
Now you need to vote
All,
on amending the 2022 schedule to move the December meeting.
Can I also ask one more question with this, about this? Well, I guess it doesn't matter, but potentially, because we had a meeting with with Central Ina for the training today. Would it impact, or would you guys, how much I said? Moving the start of that meeting to 5:30 compared to 6. And part of that would be to, yes, potentially get us out sooner, but
On which meeting we talking
next November.
I already know I'm not here.
Okay.
Maybe, so I already know I'm out.
So he's moving it at any time.
Yes, you can move it to 3 o'clock for all that. I'm gonna
he
take
makes the
that.
motion and he seconds.
Yeah, right.
We know that you all work, so we want to make sure that we're.
That's not a good schedule.
And what it would be for is where we could do the first 30 minutes of the meeting for any type of actual planning board business, and then the training that's not joint with council would start at 6, basically. And potentially, like I said, that just gives us a little leeway. We're not pushing the training further back and then getting everybody out of here later.
Anybody have any issues? Besides Mike, no, we know that, but
So moving the November 15th meeting to 5:30.
And if you want to do it, you can do one motion, just saying to amend the 2022 schedule as discussed, and I'll just make sure to make that in the minutes, the changes.
And you can do it. You want to do it.
Go ahead,
You can make
you
Okay.
okay with it?
Yeah.
Kent, Marcus?
You guys
Want me
made
to
your
make the
first, you
amendment?
want to make your first, you want to rip the Band-Aid off?
Not yet.
No, with this
Okay,
one. yeah,
okay,
that's it.
all right. All right, I can make it. So I'll make a motion to, move the November 15th
2022 schedule as discussed.
after I do this 5:30 one. Oh, no, just the whole thing. Oh, okay. So to amend, the 2022 schedule as discussed.
Second.
She got my back.
Telling you.
All in favor?
Too efficient.
Mike, I'm giving you the gavel. Aye.
Okay.
Are you? Give me the hand. All right.
Yeah, I don't want to hold you guys here longer. Thanks for everything tonight. I don't really have anything to specifically update you on, but yeah, I think we're good. But I just want to have this on the agenda where I can update you on certain potential proposals and everything.
We go on action items. Hunter just gave himself a laundry list. Including deciding between a text amendment or the civic zoning district for the Women's Health Center. Discussing with DOT about a traffic study, possible solutions for Marvin Road, and possibly sharing our speed data from our speed radars. Drafting the formal Gates text amendment based on the planning board's feedback.
How about adding the board member for the, get in touch with the board member for the department, or is that what, did you say that for the?
Yeah, I'm going to look into all that with DOT.
Okay, yeah.
So we'll take care of all that. That's all I got.
All right. Board member comments.
Start with Melinda.
Marcus, welcome.
Thank you.
Very nice to have you. And thanks everybody for watching.
Again, welcome to our group. We certainly have a lot of fun here, a lot of good discussions, but to everybody else, good to see everybody in flesh and blood. It's been some time. Staff, thank you very much for everything you all do. That's all.
Michael?
Mark, it's good to have you here. Good to see you. I'm looking forward to working with you. And,
What makes it? Thank you everyone for this opportunity to work on the board. We have to give you the best I can. Don't worry, I will rip off the page.
Well, welcome. We appreciate you applying and serving on the board. Most of the time, it's a lot of fun, and sometimes it's challenging, but I think having a nice, good group of people that, you know, have different views and different living situations makes it interesting and fair. So we look forward to your contributions, and staff as always. You guys rock. Bob.
Gentlemen like this can get promoted from coffee to council. And showing up at coffee and council, look where it got you. I know. Gee, and that was like, what, 2.5 months? I mean, that was.
Marcus, was that promoted or suckered or like, what's the word?
Now, be careful, not running for office.
I know.
I know, Joe's looking, Joe's always, you want to run? You want to run? All right. Well, I guess that's it.
No,
I know. I gotta get my gavel.
Oh.
I was looking for my gavel. Gotta be official. So if I could have a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Great. Who wants a second?
Second.
All right, let's give more that one to Marcus. All right, all in favor? All right, meeting adjourned.
Great meetings. Yeah, I think it's 3 minutes, right?
You're always like, it's time to go, it's time to go. I gotta get my beauty sleep.
See you guys in December. Have a great November meeting.
Where are you?
I'll watch you on YouTube.
Where are you?